Matthew Laza and Emma Wolf with us.
They are. You're an ex-Labour.
Good morning, I am.
Well, they're doing brilliantly, aren't they?
Well, it's a difficult week. The Prime Minister was out yesterday, all guns blazing.
Buzzword.
It's Monday morning.
Because I heard a government minister say 7 times this morning, it's a difficult decision. It's the wrong decision.
Well, I don't think it's an easy decision, but I think it is...
Is it the right decision?
I mean, if I was a Labour MP...
Yes. Right or wrong?
I wouldn't have done it if I'd been the Chancellor, but now they've done it, they've probably got to stick to their guns, because otherwise they look... well, I think that presumably we'll have a small rabbit out of the hat on the terms of take-up of pension credit.
So even though it's wrong, you've got to stick to it.
Well, I think it's a very finely balanced decision. I think that they saw a bigger gap in the books when they got in than they wanted to. No Labour MP wants to vote to winter fuel allowance, which after all was a Labour invention. We've discussed it before. How many chancellors? I think you said last week that it's gone through 7 chancellors, is it?
Tory.
Including Tory chancellors. So, getting rid of the winter fuel allowance for most pensioners, but not all pensioners, the very poorest pensioners will still get it, is not what Labour people want to do.
Baker, a former pensions minister on the Liberal Democrat side, said there are a million pensioners, Steve Webb, sorry, who are below the poverty line who will not get it, and they will not, because they are not entitled to
pension credit.
Pension credit.
And that's
a million pensioners in poverty. You're taking away their winter fuel.
800,000 more pensioners are entitled to pension credit, and so what I think the government will do today is I don't know if the million are in the 800,000 within that million, but 800,000 more entitled to pension credit. We need a massive campaign to encourage poorer pensioners to take up the help that's there. We know that there's reluctance with some older people because they don't like to apply for benefits.
I'm really embarrassed to see Labour supporters and Labour advisors and Labour voters defending this. This is about morals, and stop saying, oh, it's about unpopular decisions and tough choices. This is going to save them, what, 1.4 billion? People are really angry about this and really sad, and there are pensioners out there who will miss out. 10 million, by the way, are having it withdrawn. The most vulnerable are just terrified now. They are terrified to put their heating on. They will be cold this winter. Yes, more of them should be taking up pension credit, but lots of them don't. Lots of pensioners are not online. They can't do those phone lines. They don't know how to do that. They are simply going to be vulnerable and cold. And it's just such an odd decision to make. Who do you hit first when you come to power? Who do you hit? You hit the most vulnerable. It's such a vindictive...
Well, it's children. They're hitting children with the private school tax, and they're hitting the elderly with this.
And meanwhile, a lot of vulnerable people as well on the NHS are suffering.
Said it will take months to get the pension credit.
It will take months, but that's not the point. There are lots of older people. They're not rational. They're not thinking, well, I can claim it back. They don't have cash the way that we do. They can't tide themselves over. They will just not put the heating on. I was talking to a lady who lives on our ground floor. She said, I'll just stay in one room with my blanket on.
And I think, it's not easy. It's not easy to defend it when it wasn't in the manifesto as well.
£1.4 billion saved and 11 billion still going on foreign aid.
The argument on the other side of the thing is the other side of the argument is that when you take things like the 2-child benefit cap, the two-child cap on benefits, people think it's just for child benefit, but it's actually on all benefits. After the second child, you don't get extra benefits. You know that affects families as well, but that's having to stay because there is no money. So that's the argument the Prime Minister is making, but it's a very emotive one. And yes, there are pensioners who are not entitled to pension credit but are far from well off, who are going to worry about paying their bills, and that is the case.
Sorry to interrupt again. You just said there's no money. Well, there's money for train drivers, there's money for junior doctors, there's money for foreign aid. I'm not saying those things are wrong, but there is money. There is money for the choices that Labour have made.
And I think the optics of effectively the first 2 decisions being yes to a public sector pay rise, I think the public sector pay rise is justified. We're talking about nurses and teachers and police officers who are going to get the pay rise they deserve. But I think it's a very difficult decision to make this, and I suspect politically, as well as morally probably, they're regretting it deeply as well. But now they are trying to stick to their guns.
And you can just hear the Tories now. Most people over the age of 70 vote Conservative. We'll whack Tory voters. That's what we're doing. We're whacking Tory voters because we're going to support our public sector mates and our train drivers and the noisy union barons from ASLEF with huge inflation-busting pay rises, but we're going to screw the pensions.
I think that 63 is now the age when you hit 63, you're more likely to vote Tory than Labour. Below that, you're more likely to vote Labour than Tory. So clearly, if there was a political calculation that went into this, it was a cynical one. I mean, talking to people, inside numbers 10 and 11, I don't think it was done as cynically as that. They basically thought we have to make a cut. This was obviously presented on the list of options, and they thought this was probably the sort of quickest and easiest one, because of course at the moment millionaires get the winter fuel allowance, and quite a lot of rich pensioners. Pensioner poverty's halved in the last 25 years. Fuel poverty's halved for pensioners. But that doesn't mean. But if you're on 15 grand a year and you're worrying about putting your heating on, that doesn't mean anything. So I think it was something that looked like good on paper.
Getting their energy bills paid by the taxpayer.
Yeah, well, they get their second one.
Who in many cases have fought for our country. Most of them have worked all their lives, paid into the system. They're being punished. I
think that there will be. I wish there was a way of doing this which meant that it was only the very richest pensioners that didn't get any, didn't hit the poor ones.
It's wrong.
I mean, if I was the Chancellor, I mean, you know, I personally think. Well, I'm not going to be forced into saying I think it was wrong. I think it was because it wasn't a mistake. I'm going to say it wasn't a mistake to take him.
If it was a Tory government, you'd say it was wrong.
Well, what I think the question for the Tories is, Andrew, is what would the Tories cut? Because they've got to find the money.
They've got 121 MPs. They've got they're in opposition. You're in power now, mate. Own it.
I think. Well, I am owning it in the sense that they've taken the difficult decision and they're going to stick with it. But you know, if I was running the country, it wouldn't have been the decision that I personally would have taken.
Decision, unpopular decision. It's morally bankrupt. It's a cruel decision. It's a vindictive decision.
This is interesting because Maggie's got in touch at home and she said, and people are saying you're doing a very good job of trying to defend the indefensible. But Maggie said, stop trying to defend it. Pensioners have no scope to increase their income. That's what makes it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if you're...
Great point, because actually...
That is a very good point, Maggie.
You know, the pensioners, they can't go out and get a job. They can't add a few more hours at work.
Yeah.
They can't go and get something part-time. That's why it's so cruel.
Many of them are at the limit of what they can do.
Exactly.
We've already cut back over the last few years with cost of living crisis.
And we've seen the energy price cap, go up. So I think it's. I mean, Maggie's absolutely right. It's very, very difficult for, obviously most pensioners.
If you think, I know, and I keep hearing this thing about optics, which I'm sorry is political.
Yeah, that's awful.
And then Chancellor's credibility. Andrew Warnsley writing about the Chancellor's credibility. It makes me so angry because these are real people's lives.
Yeah,
you know what it's like?
Absolutely. And look, every tweet that a Labour politician has sent...
5 months.
Every tweet a Labour politician has sent about, people having to choose between heating and eating is quite rightly being raked up. Let's see if there's more support for people who are above pension credit, but it come back today.
Broadcast around this morning, Dame Diana Johnson, a Home Office Minister, in 2005, it's a really important policy, and only Labour can protect the winter fuel allowance from the wicked Tories.
I think, I have...
She was defending...
Yeah, and I'm not a minister...
The word you're using, she kept saying it's a...
Yeah, well, I mean, I would go further than the minister would. I mean, and say it's a decision that I wouldn't have taken. I think that... I think it's a decision that's backfired. I'm not even saying necessarily that I would have stuck to my guns in the way they are. I'm just saying they're going to, because they've decided to make it an issue of confidence.
Would really boost their popularity.
That may be a mistake.
They would really boost their popularity right now just to reverse this. Just to say we got that wrong.
Look weak, flip-flop.
Well, of course it would. Of course it would, but it's still.
So there's no. You're right, Beth. There's no good way. Yeah.
Of course, there is an argument to say that multi-millionaire pensioners don't need this, right? Yeah. We all agree with that. If you're living in a big house and you've got your country pile and you've got your cars, you don't need this few £100 a year. So they started out with the right intention, but terribly executed.
So the problem is, I mean, do you remember William G. Stewart used to present 15 to 1, the quiz show? So when I was working on the One show, he wanted to make a film which we made about how people like him didn't deserve the winter fuel allowance. Yeah. And so, I think that's absolutely right, that the very richest, and there are, quite a lot of rich pensioners, that's not the majority, but there are, and including the King. So I would have taxed it for higher rate taxpayers, which obviously some people's investments and pension income is such that they pay that. The problem is it's a blunt instrument because most pensions don't do a tax return, so therefore but I mean it's a mess. It's a mess.
The job of government is to think these things through, and let's have a campaign where wealthier pensioners, and I know plenty of wealthier older people that say I send that £300 to charity. Let's have a campaign where those people work out a way to send it back or to not claim it or whatever it is, but to do this and to terrify older people.
There must be some sort of
about this winter.
There must be some sort of online simplistic
I think
box exercise.
I think the GWP computer wouldn't cope with anything other than take...
Justin Burton's about this. Why can't they pay the £300 into the people's state pension? And then if you're a high-paid taxpayer, you're going to pay high-rate tax. She gets money back.
That is one of the solutions you could have done. And then they decided to do this very blunt instrument because they thought it was a clever and simple and clean thing to do.
That's in a sense, it means test it for you.
Yeah. I mean, it only means test it for high-rate taxpayers. Well, obviously, there are still people on 30 and 40 grand who would be getting that. But
you don't pay tax at all. You're not going to pay any tax on it.
And if you guys think that earning 15 grand, living on £15,000 a year, means that you can just have your heating...
Absolutely not. And I think... No, I don't, Emma. And I don't think the government...
That's a very, very low salary.
Absolutely, and that's why it's such a blunt instrument, and that's why it's backfiring so disastrously. And look, you know, we're in the state where we could see, you know, up to 50 MPs rebel, and if he doesn't withdraw the whip from them, he's going to look weak because he withdrew the whip on the two-child benefit cap.
They're cowards. They'll abstain rather than vote again.
And they'll probably just about save their lives. But it's a big baptism of fire for a lot of the new MPs. There's one of the new MPs who used to work for the National Pensioner Convention, who's been going around, you know, sort of giving seminars apparently for the new MPs, explaining just how many people are going to be.
For Paul?
Yes.
Barrowed name.
Yeah, older chap, who spent a lot of his career campaigning on pensions issues, and he's persuading other people.
Yeah, and we have that Labour analysis this morning from 2017, don't we, showing that withdrawing the winter fuel allowance could lead to up to 4,000 excess deaths. So those are deaths.
OK, Emma, Matthew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now you'll be back in the next hour. We had loads of great stories to get through. We will do them in the next hour. But first of all, here's Tatiana Sant.